So there's a lot of people that seem to have this misunderstanding when it comes to Shibarium and Shiba Inu. And I want to provide a little clarity here. All right. There's some people that believe that Shiba Inu can only survive and thrive if Shibarium works. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. Okay. Shiba Inu stands on its own. It's got the most holders throughout the entire SHIB ecosystem. It's got the most attention throughout the entire SHIB ecosystem. If that wasn't the case, it wouldn't be the top holder, right? Bone would have more holders. Leash would have more holders, right? But that simply just isn't the case. There are absolute Shiba Inu diehards out there that are solely focused on SHIB. Okay. Now, Shibarium can help. All right. If we get to this point where, obviously there's burns that are sizable enough. Obviously, we talked about that earlier today. If we get to that point, that definitely helps, right? Shiba Inu having utility within Shibarium definitely helps. But if Shibarium were to fail and go away, bone, leash, go away, it's not that detrimental to the future success of SHIB. The reason I say that is if you really think about it, the capital redistribution from SHIB throughout the SHIB ecosystem has pretty much happened for the most part, right? People flowing into bone, people flowing into leash, obviously people flowing into treat eventually. I'm sure some of that will happen, but it hasn't happened on like this huge major scale, but it has happened nonetheless. I think a really good way to look at this is if you compare it to something like Hex, right? Hex was a top 3 coin in the space and it launched an entire ecosystem, right? Pulse Chain, PulseX, PHEX, and you had this capital redistribution. It's spread throughout the space. Now, obviously there's some other bigger things going on there, but just because you've had that capital redistribution in a bear market doesn't necessarily hinder the future growth of the asset. When you get to a bull market cycle, there is a lot of outside capital that flows in and will probably flow into all 3 or 4 of these assets within the SHIB ecosystem. Okay. Now, SHIB is still extremely young. It's only been around for 3 years now. All right. Hasn't even seen a full market cycle. And I would argue that it has a long way to go still because of how few of people hold it. Just look at something like Dogecoin, for example, right? Shiba Inu without utility is basically a better Dogecoin because it's deflationary. All right. Now, there's only 1.2, 1.3 million holders compared to something like Doge that has 4 million holders. I would argue that SHIB is better positioned for upcoming market cycles and can still see insane rates of growth. As always, this is not financial advice, but people need to realize that SHIB is not necessarily dependent on Shibarium. Shibarium is kind of its own standalone thing. It's a little bit dependent on SHIB, right? Because if SHIB were to crash and burn, Shibarium comes down. If Shibarium crashes and burn, it doesn't mean that SHIB comes down. All right. It's like what is this? A square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. All right. It's really the best way to describe it here. But I wanted to shed a sense of clarity on this because I think some people get this a little mixed up here. Okay. That's why I say that SHIB is the dog. SHIB is the one that can carry everything. That's why it's important that I think the developers of the SHIB ecosystem of Shibarium and all these things, right? They need to incorporate SHIB a little more in some way, shape, or form, or they are at risk of everything kind of falling to crap. So appreciate you guys. Love to hear your thoughts on this, but I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.